All right, Brad, there is a letter that Microsoft has co-signed along with various members of the chambers and the Association of Washington Business, the Washington Roundtable. I see every major company in the Puget Sound area seems to be represented in this letter. What are you trying to get across with this letter to the state legislature?
Well, the entire business community in this state is absolutely united. We care deeply about what our state government does for the public, but the proposals from the legislature for this year's budget go too far. They spend more than we can afford as a state. They have tax increases that are too high. And our view as the business community, really as the economic engine of this state, is that these tax proposals will undermine the economy. They are a threat to jobs. They will force businesses to pass on to consumers higher prices that consumers should not have to pay. We are asking the legislature to think again.
And you aren't specifically talking about the wealth tax here, which it seems like the governor has now taken off the table. Are you talking specifically about the payroll tax?
Well, the letter that we've signed, as have businesses across the state, really focuses on both the payroll tax and the wealth tax. The payroll tax would be a tax on jobs. It would make it harder to keep jobs in this state or create new jobs. The wealth tax, in our view, would cause people to leave the state. It would undermine entrepreneurship. It would discourage people from starting new companies in Washington state. It would be bad for the economy.
I've heard you flat out say it will cost jobs.
The interesting thing about the wealth tax is that it is not a new or novel concept. 13 countries across Europe adopted precisely this type of tax in the 1980s, and almost all of them ended up abolishing it because they all had the same experience. This type of tax across Europe destroyed jobs. It caused people with financial wealth to leave countries. It led companies to get started in other places. We should learn from that experience rather than repeat it.
I can hear from the other side of this coin, though, the idea that a lot of these companies are doing extremely well, that they can afford to pay a little bit more to boost up the economy or close the spending gap in Olympia. How do you respond to that?
Well, we appreciate what we all need to do together as a community to support this state. And as companies, many of us have supported tax increases in the past. And this letter does not say no new taxes. It says no new payroll tax, no new wealth tax. Let's be balanced. Let's live within our means. And there is room to have a conversation.
I know that it's been cited quite a bit in this discussion what has happened in Seattle with the jumpstart tax and what Amazon did in the years to follow from the jumpstart tax. And again, you hear from people in Seattle who say it's just an empty threat. Is this an empty threat to suggest that jobs will move out of the state or move to British Columbia if the state legislature and the governor were to move forward on a payroll tax?
I always want a business to be civically minded and responsible, but we can't ignore economics. And even in Seattle, Amazon has fewer jobs today than when that first payroll tax was enacted, 10,000 fewer jobs. While in Bellevue, Amazon has added 25,000 jobs. I think the economics would make virtually inevitable the transfer of some jobs out of Washington state to Idaho, to British Columbia, to other states in the United States. That is what the experience in Europe showed there. Let's learn from experience and not repeat mistakes that others have already made.
And in this letter, it says, for example, it is 30% less expensive to employ a software engineer in Vancouver, BC than in the Puget Sound. Why is that, especially with the exchange rate right now and the strength of the American dollar versus the Canadian dollar?
Well, it is cheaper to employ a software developer in Vancouver. And part of it is the exchange rate. There's other factors as well. But it's why when you go to Vancouver, the engineering population has really skyrocketed this decade. And you see not only Microsoft, but you see Amazon, you see Apple, you see Zillow, you see a whole host of startups expanding jobs in Vancouver. And it's great for Vancouver, it's great for our entire region, but it is a reminder of economics at work. And you just can't expect people to ignore economics when they're working to run a business.
So what do you think the resolution is here? There's only 26 days left in the session, or by the time anybody may see this, there'll be fewer days left in the legislative session.
I am optimistic that if we all lean in together, we can find a sensible path. The truth is, a growing economy will grow the state budget by 6.8% in the next biennium, even if there are no tax increases. And I think there's opportunities to talk about what else is needed. But I do think, thank goodness, Governor Ferguson took the wealth tax off the table. Thank goodness Governor Ferguson is asking the state to live within its means. I think he is pointing in the right direction. And if we all come together with a sense of goodwill and an effort to really find common ground, I think we can see a budget emerge before this session ends.